Hello, I am pleased to welcome everyone joining us today for a celebration of the 2020 graduating class. My name is Kevin Hare. I am the Interim Dean of the Faculty of Mathematics. I am also a proud alumni from this faculty, having received my Bachelor's of Mathematics in 1997 with a double major in pure mathematics and computer science. Soon you will meet our presenters, but before you do, alumnus Mike has a brief message he would like to share with the class of 2020.
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Mike Jutan here, Bachelor of Math, Computer Science 2007 graduate. Just doing some socially distanced and responsible exercising here in the park. And wanting to wish you, the math class of 2020, a very hearty congratulations on a fantastic achievement. It really is a whole ton of work at Waterloo, as you well know, and it's a great and fantastic achievement to complete it. So great job. I wish you all the very best. I know the world is absolutely insane right now. Thankfully, as a computer scientist, I've been very happily working from home for the last few months, and I hope you all have similar opportunities. I hope you're all brushing up on your interviewing from home skills. You're going to need it, so make sure to get those Zoom accounts, Zoom backgrounds organized, or whatever you got to do these days, whatever you kids do. And I wish you all the best. I hope you find the dream job that you're looking for. Waterloo, really brought me catapulted me straight to the job of my dreams. I'm working on the Mandalorian TV show right now for Lucasfilm. I've been doing visual effects for the last 13 years or so, and it really has been fantastic. And really, that joy was brought to me by the fantastic education I got from Waterloo. So our graduates are viewed very highly in the field, as I'm sure you well know. I hope to see lots of you out at alumni events in the future in the San Francisco Bay Area, and if not there, then at some point back home here in Waterloo. I hope you guys are doing well, and all the best for the future.
Now I am pleased to introduce your moderator for today, Alan Yi-Lun, class of 2020, is a former MASOC president.
Hello and welcome to the Faculty of Mathematics virtual celebration of the graduating class of 2020. I'd just like to thank Dean Hare for his wonderful introduction and Mike Jutan for his fantastic video message. We're so happy that you've joined us here today to celebrate the class of 2020. So my name's Alan. I'm a graduating student and a CS major and CO minor. As a graduating student, I recognize that this is quite a crossroads for all of us in deciding what to do next after we have our diploma in hand, whether that's a new job, searching for a job, starting your own business, more school, or anything. I realize it can be a very uncertain time given the current economic and political situation, but luckily we have panelists who have their own crossroad moments since graduating from Waterloo to share with us. Before we jump into our conversation today, I'd just like to remind everyone again that you'll be muted throughout the panel. Class of 2020 attendees will have exclusive access to the open question session with our panel. So please submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A functionality. If you have any issues with sound or video, please use the chat function and our team will be happy to assist you. Thanks so much for participating. And now I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists, all University of Waterloo Faculty of Mathematics alumni. It's my honor and privilege to introduce you to each of them. So Sam Pasupalak was the co-founder and CEO of Maluuba, a Canadian technology company conducting research in artificial intelligence and language understanding. Founded in 2011, the company was acquired by Microsoft in 2017. Sam founded Maluuba with the vision to solve artificial general intelligence by creating literate machines that can think, reason, and communicate like humans. In 2019, Sam graduated with his master's in political science from the London School of Economics. At the same time, he was also a member of the team at Inovia Capital, based out of London, UK. Currently, Sam is pursuing his next venture while living in India. Sam graduated 2012 from Waterloo with a BSc in computer science. Sam is also a dedicated philanthropist, volunteer, and friend of the University of Waterloo. Next, we have Paul Deforno, who is a leading subject matter expert in e-commerce. He is a managing director at Deloitte Digital, based out of Columbus, Ohio. He brings more than 25 years of experience in strategy, consulting, technology, and digital transformation. Previously, he helped to establish and significantly grow the e-commerce practice of Sapient and Razorfish, as well as being CTO of one of the early .com startups, RealAge.com. Paul graduated in 1995 from Waterloo with a Bachelor of Mathematics and Joint Honors Mathematics Business Administration with Computer Science. In 2019, he was awarded the Alumni Lifetime Achievement Award from St. Jerome's University. Michelle Hung is author and founder of the Sassy Investor. An advocate for financial literacy, she is on a mission to spread the importance of financial independence and how to achieve it. Prior to starting her business, she spent 7 years working in investment banking and venture capital. She graduated from the University of Waterloo in 2008 with a Bachelor of Mathematics and a specialization in finance, and is also a CFA charter holder. Paul Mclellan is an industry leader in healthcare quality improvement, value-based contracting, and population health management. He currently serves as the president of the Medical Advantage Group in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Paul's experience also includes the launch of 2 startup companies, Route One, an automotive finance software platform, and RealAge, which he worked on with Paul Deforno, an online health risk appraisal system. Paul graduated in 1995 with his Bachelor of Mathematics, majoring in business administration with a specialization in information systems. So let's go in order and start with Sam. Could you tell us a little bit more about a crossroads moment in your life and go over the ideas you had in approaching it and what happened in the end?
I graduated from University of Waterloo in 2012 in computer science. I had applied for co-op a number of times. I was in the co-op program. So I applied for co-op jobs like everyone else, and I really wanted to get a job in Microsoft. And I remember I was rejected at least 3 times from Microsoft. So when I graduated, all my friends had jobs in Amazon and Google and Facebook and all these high-tech startups, and I really didn't have one. So I decided I'll start my own startup instead. And we started an artificial intelligence company called Maluuba. It wasn't, the artificial intelligence hype wasn't that big back in 2012. It was just starting up back then, but we were one of the first players back then. And then there was, we're competing with the big companies like Apple and Facebook and Google. We're trying to create something like Siri, like a voice assistant where you can naturally talk to your phone and ask about, just like Siri does, like, hey, what's the weather out there? Can I get sushi in 24th and Mission in San Francisco? So it was very difficult times for the first few years when I started my company in 2012. In fact, before I did any fundraising in the later years, I had to first sleep. I didn't have much money. I just graduated from school, didn't have any money. I had to sleep in my friend's couch for at least 3-4 months. And then following that, I even ran out of money further. So I had to stay in another friend's closet. You know, it's like the Harry Potter closet kind of. And all my employees used to make fun of me afterwards about that. But those are the struggling days we had back when I started my company. Eventually, after a lot of perseverance and hard work for 4 or 5 years, we started seeing some meaningful results. One story that comes to mind was in 2013, when one of the companies I just mentioned wanted to buy us. And we were running low in cash. I had to do some layoffs and pay cuts in my company. And here I have a $25 million offer to acquire my company by this big Fortune 5 company. It's top 5 companies in the world. They tried to buy my company, and I said, no, we'd like to build a bigger company, in fact. And here we're running out of money. So that was a big gamble we took. Eventually it paid off. And in 2017, I did end up selling my company to Microsoft. Yeah, that was a big turnaround. And at the end, I did meet Bill Gates, and I told him, hey, Bill, like at the end, you had to, instead of giving me a co-op position, I could have got full-time. You have to pay all this money to buy my company. So that was kind of the full circle with Microsoft. So that's the story.
That's super inspirational, Sam, and it's really cool to sort of hear that, especially in a place where I know a lot of graduates today might have difficulty finding a job in today's climate. I'm curious, so once you sold your company to Microsoft in 2017, what was sort of the next crossroads you faced? You did mention that you've always wanted to work at Microsoft, and now you had the opportunity after selling your company. And of course, I saw the picture of you with Bill Gates as well that was published. So how was the next crossroads like? What'd you do after?
So I had a bunch of options at this point of time to either continue to work in Microsoft, and it's a big organization, as you all know, or a lot of investors wanted to invest in some tech startup in Silicon Valley or even Waterloo or Toronto if I wanted to start one. Or so what I did was, instead of following what everyone expected me to do, I again took a very unconventional path, and I went for a master's in political science to try to understand a bit, not from the technology side of things, try to understand from political and economic side of things, and try to do something in social entrepreneurship. So I did a master's in comparative politics from London School of Economics. And right now I'm in India. And so that's why hopefully the data is working fine and you guys can hear me fine. It's a third world country. I'm sorry about that, but I'm trying to do something in microfinancing, most possibly here. I'm trying to figure out what my next venture is. And because only less than 2% of all of the whole country, 1.34 billion people, have access to credit. And poor people need access to loans. And there needs to be an efficient way of doing that. And banks don't really offer loans to poor people. So that's kind of my thought right now. And yes, I'd follow the unconventional path of starting my next tech startup with all the investors interested, or continuing my path in Microsoft.
Great. Thanks so much, Sam. That's really inspirational. I hope the class of 2020 can learn something from that. Next, could we have our panelist, Paul Deforno? Do you mind telling us about a crossroads moment that you experienced in your career since graduating in 1995?
Sure, love to. But wow, I got to go after Sam. That was an amazing story. Jeez. I didn't live in a closet, but I am thankful to be here and sharing my story with you. It's almost 25 years exactly to the day that I graduated from Waterloo, and in fact graduated from St. Jerome's University, that at the time also did mathematics. So part of what I've always been passionate about and was lucky enough at Waterloo really prepped me for riding the wave of the internet. In fact, I remember when I was in 93, 94 in school, walking by in a computer lab, I walked by Ian Goldberg, who's now a professor there, and he's showing this really cool thing. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, it's a web browser. And I literally saw the first web browser within weeks of when it was invented at the University of Illinois. And because of Waterloo, I got to see some of those things within weeks of inventions, as many of the students do now. So a lot of that started my passion, and the experience in the co-op, it really helped. My early career was around helping, get businesses onto the internet. I was at a startup, realage.com, with Paul, who will talk here right after here, but help companies such as BMW Financial Services get their first internet out. And so because of Waterloo and my experience, that really created my passion and what I've been able to do. But part of my career, I spent my first go around with Deloitte Consulting. I again was building up my career, had great experiences learning on how to, large corporations getting into digitally transform them onto technology, onto the web, in e-commerce, and got to work with some, great businesses like Victoria's Secret, Limited Brands, Borders Bookstores. But within a big consulting firm, when you get to making your case to make it to the next level to partner or managing director, at that point, you have to, make a decision. And at that point, around 2007 and 8, Deloitte really wasn't in the market around some of the digital businesses. And so at that point, they said, well, if you really want to make it to the next level, you've got to switch and go into back office ERP implementations. Now, God bless all the people that do that work. That's not me. And so I had to stay true to what my passion was. And my passion was around web and digital And so during the recession of 2008, I made the choice to jump to a smaller company and restart. I had all those connections. It would have been an easy to safe choice to stay and build a business within Deloitte, but I chose to go to a small company, and there we're able to sell one of the largest e-commerce and help one of the largest retailers here, Target. Actually, at the time, Target 10 plus 12 years ago was on Amazon, almost all their commerce. And I led a team to help move them off of Amazon onto their own platform. And just to understand, moving to this was at the time where when we first moved to Chicago for this new business, the first two banks trying to get a mortgage loan went out of business. And so it was a little scary to move and jump in, but ultimately that was my passion. And I think if you follow your passions and continue to do what you believe is great, you'll get there. And so that led to, ironically, I made it back to Deloitte. They're now one of the largest in Deloitte in digital and doing that e-commerce. And I helped to run our e-commerce practice. And so that moment of truth, I think for all of you that are out there and uncertain, stick to what your passion is.
Hey, thanks so much, Paul. That's really telling, especially your story about 2008. Some would say that 2020, the situation is similar in a lot of ways, at least economically. And I know that being in a place of uncertainty and not being clear on your next step in life can be really difficult. Can you share a little bit more with our class of 2020 how to best navigate that uncertainty? I know you mentioned staying true to yourself, but especially with mounting financial pressures and different societal pressures on graduates who are looking for maybe their first full-time experience. Do you have any advice about the trade-offs between sort of how to decide that next step?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, for all of you out there, this is just is going to be a blip. When you look back in 20 years, you'll think back about 2020 and how fast it went by. Right now, it may seem bigger than it is, but in greater context, now I'm the old guy and looking back, and some of these 2008, it went by so fast. And so given that, keep that in the back of your mind. But while you have this chance, if you have some challenges, maybe you don't have a job yet, maybe you're waiting on something, use this opportunity to, a couple of opportunities. First of all, especially now in the COVID crisis, how do you improve your digital presence, right? A lot of the people that I've hired, I've seen who are passionate or out there on Twitter or on LinkedIn sharing stories about things that they're doing, so you have this opportunity to improve your digital presence, get out there, show your passion about what you love to do, right? And that's something that you can control. The more that you project that out, the more you're going to naturally find new opportunities. And then the last thing, especially during this time that you want to get new experiences, if you have the opportunity, as Sam talked about, think about all the volunteer opportunities. There's so many nonprofits out there that are struggling. And actually, if they had some help with technology, that's something I've been lucky enough. I'm working with the Catholic Charities here in Columbus on their technology committee and helping them, move to new technologies. There's a lot of opportunities that you can go out there with nonprofits, help them learn stuff. You'll make connections and you actually help, the community around you.
Thanks so much, Paul. I really appreciate that message, especially about helping out communities and making the most out of a difficult time. And speaking of that, from what I understand, Michelle, you have an experience about taking a difficult time for you and turning that into an opportunity. Could you tell us a little bit more about that moment and how that happened?
It's interesting, Paul, you mentioned reset at the time of, having that crossroads moment. And that's exactly how I feel from my experience. So my crossroads moment happened, when I said, I'm never handing out another resume again. At that time, I was laid off from my full-time job of around 6 years on Bay Street. I was doing investment banking, and I was going through the interviewing process again. So undergrads, graduates, if you're going through that, I feel your pain. It was an interesting time period in my life because not only was I unemployed, but also I was coming out of a long-term relationship, a 12-year relationship. So I was pretty much going through a divorce. I had to move out of my condo downtown that I was sharing with my partner at the time, and I had to move back to my parents' house. So I was that typical millennial at 31 years old, having to start all over again. I experienced a lot of pain that year, but with that comes a lot of growth. And all I could remember was I just wanted to restart my life. You know, I wanted to get myself on my feet again. I want to get my high-paying job on Bay Street, get my own place, and continue building my career and being a happy single girl. Okay, that never happened. It was certainly a frustrating period going through the interview process again, because you know it was a stark reminder of 2008, the year that I graduated from Waterloo, and again, like during that time, like I couldn't land a job for almost a year, a full-time job that is. But this time, after I was laid off, the interview process was a bit different. There were openings, people were hiring, but for some reason, it just wasn't happening. I was, you know, saying to myself, you know, I'm not even applying for jobs that are like different from what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make a lateral move, literally doing the same thing I was doing before, but just at a different firm. So it was very, you know, it was very upsetting, constantly getting rejected, interview after interview, project after project, presenting at these interviews. And there was even one day where I was on the phone with one employer getting rejected from a position at the same time I had my laptop open, and you know I see an email pop up with another rejection from another employer. When you become so emotionally invested in the process with the hope of getting chosen, it's really draining, and it certainly takes a toll on you. And that's when I realized, you know, I'm putting so much power in the hands of employers, and I'm not even employed with them. It's not even about having a crappy boss I have to deal with. Like, these are people in places I don't even work for. And then later on that evening, after, you know, getting my double rejection, I call it, I just said, you know, I'm never handing out another resume again. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, there has to be another way for me to create my own income, create a business. And I did that starting with what I was good at. I had to look at the skills that I've developed and what I knew. And it all started off with writing a book, which I published last year. And it evolved into a business that I'm still running now. So, you know, the whole business starting journey, it felt so natural, from coming up with a brand to a name to piecing everything together. And that's when I knew this was what I'm meant to do. It's the path I'm supposed to be on.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Especially when you were describing interviewing. Personally, I really feel that as someone who had to interview for their first full-time job recently, and I'm sure many of our graduating class do as well. One thing you mentioned, Michelle, is that you decided to pursue your own business idea instead of more education. From what I understand, in the finance sector, a lot of people tend to do an MBA when they feel stalled with their career and whatnot. Can you share your decision-making process behind choosing to pursue your own business over an MBA, and your advice to others who are split between additional schooling or starting a new adventure, whether that's at someone else's business or making their own business?
Yeah, sure. I did contemplate getting an MBA. I even bought my GMAT book and I started studying for it after I was laid off. I looked through my finances. I thought it was doable. The idea of starting a business wasn't as pronounced, not until after getting rejected like dozens of times by employers. And, you know, that's when I decided, okay, I want to build a business and create my own income. It definitely was an itch I've always had at the back of my head, wanting to be my own boss. So I weighed out my pros and cons of going back to school versus starting a business. I already had my CFA, so I wasn't exactly super thrilled about doing more schooling. And I thought, you know what, if my business failed, then, you know, I'll take a stab at going back to school afterwards. At least, you know, I'd have a more interesting story and experience under my belt. And I thought, okay, maybe, just maybe I'd have a shot at going to Harvard or something. So I decided, okay, well, I have $100,000, you know, to spend on education or starting a business. And I decided if I put that 100K into a business and if it flourishes, then that's great. Like that's a huge payoff. And if I failed, then I'll just go back to school and realized I wasn't cut out to be my own boss. Being about 4 years into entrepreneurship, everything that I've learned and experienced was just, looking back, it's just like way more valuable than another piece of paper, in my opinion. And it's just also one of those things where if you feel like something's calling out to you and you never do it, it's very regrettable. And for me, I never want to live a life like that. You have to, take some risks in your life and pursue what is calling out to you. So, my advice is if you do want to take a stab at starting a business, and you can always start small, like start a side hustle, start freelancing and see how it is to be managing your own time, business expenses, see where it goes, test it out. Also read a lot of books on sales and marketing. That was one of my biggest weaknesses. The ability to market and sell yourself or your product, I think, in my opinion, is just really critical.
Great, thanks so much, Michelle. And I think today we've spoken about a few leaps of faith. Some are more measured, some are just following passion. Speaking of, so Paul McLellan, so from what I understand, Paul, you did decide to leave a somewhat safe job to pursue something else. Can you talk about how you made that decision and how that turned out for you?
Sure. It was an interesting time. It was back in the early 2000s, so I was a 95 grad. And by the 2000s, I had worked through several jobs. So I was on my third job, my second in healthcare. Really enjoyed healthcare. Really enjoyed where I was working. Multi-billion-dollar company, 2,000 people in IT, lots of room to grow your career. The company has something like a 97% retention rate year over year. So people go there and never leave, right? Because it's a good environment, it's a good culture. You're doing good work, all right, and you're working with good people. So it was a safe place to be. And I was really enjoying the healthcare industry, right? That I somewhat wandered into that industry. That wasn't my plan at graduation, but I found my way into healthcare and was enjoying it. But then along came an opportunity to go back to the world of startups where I had been, but with a completely different industry. So it really was a crossroads moment. And I think a good example for folks graduating now that the road to where you want to be is almost always a windy path. So I've ended up where I wanted to be, 25 years into my career, but there certainly were a number of twists and turns that you can't predict, right? And stepping back and going into a startup in a different industry was a big decision. It wasn't so much about risk. My first job out of college was helping a company that had just emerged from bankruptcy get back on its feet. My second job was a startup. So it wasn't afraid of the risk. It wasn't really about the money. It was really about the thrill of building something, right? When you're used to that small company adrenaline, right? That gets in your system and it's hard to give up. So while I was doing good work, I was in a big safe place, and there was a longing to go back to that world, right? With some hesitations, right? One, I was going into an industry I knew nothing about, right? Certainly I had some accounting and some finance classes as part of my business major at Waterloo, but certainly wasn't a finance person by trade, and probably the only person living in Michigan who doesn't work in the automotive industry and never did, right? That's the core of our economy here where I live. So it was stepping into a job where I had no industry expertise. And it was also, I'll say, one of my first, true adult decisions that I had switched jobs. I had moved cities and moved countries and moved states, but now at that point, that's the point where you have a family, right? You have 2 little kids, you have a mortgage, you have a minivan in the driveway. And then, explaining to your wife that, hey, I'm going to throw away my really safe, good paying job and go back into the world of startups, right? That's an interesting conversation to have at home. But we worked through that, and I ultimately decided to go back. It was a lot of fun. What I love about that small company environment is really the breadth of experience that you get. Because even though I was in IT and driving the creation of a software platform, you get to work with the lawyers on contracts and patents. You get to work with the sales team on how to bring your product to market. You get to actually get out into the real world and see how people who are lending money to finance cars use your software, and you really get exposure to how business really runs in a much broader view than when you're just in your division in your big company. So that was a lot of fun. It was a great 5 years. We went from brand new company with zero revenue to having nearly 70% of the industry market share at the time I left. So we were hugely successful. It was a lot of fun, right? And I really thought it was going to be a long-term stay. And 5 years in, it was 2008. And folks may remember 2008 wasn't a particularly good year for banks, right? Or for car companies. So it was really the first time in my life that I was pausing and genuinely worried about it. Is this job going to disappear, right? You're in the leadership team, you know that you're going to make cuts. And I personally had an opportunity to go back into healthcare, do some new exciting things. It was a lot of fun, right? And then I think there's I know Paul mentioned he was at Deloitte and went back to Deloitte. I was at a big Blue Cross insurance company, and I actually stepped back out of that startup world into that Blue Cross insurance company again. So I boomeranged back and went into a pod where we were really a startup company within the organization to do some new things that they had never done. And it was a lot of fun, right? It was a lot of fun, but it was interesting that ultimately to build out the skills that I needed today to run a company, I needed to leave the industry that I really had a lot of passion about to build out those skills, right? So there's just always have an open mind at the opportunities at hand, right? They're never exactly what you want, right? It's like when you're shopping for an apartment or you're shopping for a house, right? You get most of the things on your list, but it's really hard to get everything. And especially in times like this, I would be looking at opportunities, thinking about what does this check off on my list that's going to leapfrog me to the next thing that's closer to what I want, if it's not exactly what I want today.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, so I'm actually going to a company after graduating, a small finance company, and not returning to any of my previous internships, which I thought I would. And so learning from you and Paul Deforno, I realized it's really good to realize as a new grad that it's sort of never too late to switch industries and pursue what you're interested in at that time and whatever fits. So Paul, one question I have for you is that now that you're a leader of an organization, can you sort of share what kind of diverse skill sets you need to rely on every day and how your math business degree particularly helped you develop those? As a graduating student, I feel like a lot of the times we're focused on getting that next co-op or that next job, etc. And our view is a little bit more short-term in scope. I was just wondering, as a leader, can you elaborate on what kind of skills scale towards a more managerial role?
Sure, and there's definitely an evolution over the time span of your career as you move from role to role and find what you like to do. What I like to do, today I run a consulting and professional services firm that runs across the U.S. helping medical practices run better. So we make doctors' offices work better is the core of our business, which is very exciting because ultimately you're helping patients receive better care. So there's passion in the work, but if I look at what my days hold now, you can connect your dots back to how you got there, but my days, what's great about my days is I never really know what I'm going to do, right? You might be working on your 5-year strategy and getting ready to talk about that with your board. You might be getting ready to fire a set of people, right? You might be helping close a big deal with a prospective customer. You might be negotiating really difficult terms of a contract with a supplier, or with new business you're trying to win. You really don't know what you're going to do, right? Or you're spending time mentoring your new staff, right? Or you're signing the stack of birthday cards that you sign every month so that you help people feel connected to a very geographically dispersed company, right? There's always something to do. And when I look back, at Waterloo, early in your career, it's about the skills you have, right? And can you program? Can you architect systems? Can you build good databases, right? I was IT and business. And now my life is really about, in the skills that are most important, still go back to those core principles of being able to walk into new problems where you have no idea how you're going to solve it, right? So every day is like a final exam, right? Do I have the right exam? These questions look really difficult. I'm not sure these are for my course,
right? And you have an ability to work through, right? To pause, to think about it, to look at a problem from many different angles and dissect that problem and solve it, right? And we learn to do that, you know, with math and with technology and with business skills. But it turns out thinking through how to architect teams and how to architect businesses and how to put together sales messages and thinking those through logically isn't a whole lot different than solving math problems as you evolve.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, the road is really long, but I'm grateful for your message, and I'll definitely keep that in mind, and I hope everyone else does too. At this time, thank you everyone, all of our panelists for our crossroad moments. We're just going to open up the floor for some questions from the audience now. Our first one actually is regarding finding passion. So the question from the audience is specifically, any advice for finding your passion and what you're most interested in? And I guess we can run this by having somebody unmute. Paul?
Sure, I'll start, right? And I'll say it's not something that you can plan for, right? You'll know it when you walk into it and you find it, right? I laugh and joke all the time with my team, right? Because I'm a Canadian who grew up in socialized medicine who's now running a US healthcare consulting company, right? So I have zero education for the job that I'm doing today. But for me, it really connected. My wife is a nurse, so I started out connected to healthcare. And when you're building technical solutions and you can see that those solutions connect out to real people and the work that you're doing is actually helping people get better care, helping people stay out of the hospital, right? For me, that was really exciting that there's purpose in the work and it's more than the app you're building or the database you're building. And personally, that was what I latched onto, was much more what's the industry that I'm passionate about than a specific skill set.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, that reminds me of what Sam was saying about building credit in India and sort of identifying that problem. Similarly for Sam or any of the other entrepreneurs here, of which we have many, the ex-audience question is, are there any skills you think entrepreneurs need to be successful?
I'll share some thoughts here. I think some of the skills that you'll end up using the most are things that you probably haven't, especially from being from Waterloo, and we spend so much time on the technical and learning the math, etc. The number one skill that you could really invest some time in is how to communicate well, how to present, right? The more that you're able, the differentiation that I've seen between the people that move from being the great technologist to being the leader, our number one skill set is their communication skills and how they can connect with people. And so the more that you can take trainings in power presentations, and now being remote, Zoom, learn how to use Zoom well, learn how to build up your brand and talk and connect. That will, no matter what you do, you'll get way more payback as a practical skill now that you have such a strong foundation from Waterloo.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. Michelle, Sam, did you want to comment on this question?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mentioned before that, sales and marketing is really important. And like you can have, the best product, the best service, but if people don't understand what it is that you do, you're not connecting with them, you're not, you're not relating to them, you're not selling yourself I would say in an authentic way, it's going to be hard to get traction and have people come to you and, make a purchase or try out your service. So that was one of my weaknesses. And to add to that, I did take a presentation course, and it was one of the best investments I've ever made, because to be able to communicate effectively and to sell yourself in an authentic way, I think that's really, really critical for anyone pursuing entrepreneurship.
I just wanted to add to the points of the other panelists. I completely agree with everyone. And the one thing I would say that, for example, for me, was very critical was you need to have risk appetite of taking big risks, for example, and really making big sacrifices. Like if you don't have that, then it's very, very difficult to succeed as an entrepreneur. Like I used to work 80 to 100 hours a week, every week for 5 to 6 years. I mean, that's pretty hard. You have no social life, so you have to make a lot of sacrifices in order to do that. And you have to really believe in your product or your idea and your vision in order to accomplish the startup being successful in the longer term scheme of things. Otherwise, the passion dies out over time if you really don't believe in your product so much. That is the one key ingredient, in my opinion, that will help the startup succeed.
Yeah, Sam, I would just add to that with similar thinking that you have to have an appetite and you have to learn how to deal with failures, right? Because nothing just, I have an idea and I rounded up a few people and now I'm rich, right? That just doesn't happen, whether you're running your own business or you're working your way up through a company. If you're really going to work up, and you have to be ready for setbacks. I've been running the company I'm at for just about 6 years now. And we probably have 10 failures for each one success. And you have to have an appetite for eternally trying things and making it okay with yourself that you fail, and making it okay for your team that they fail, right? Because if people aren't willing to take those chances, you're never going to differentiate yourself in the market. You're never going to beat out the competition, right? You've just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and never let those failures slow you down or set you back. And that is a lot easier said than done, right? Everybody says that, but when it's your idea and it totally bombs, it is soul-searching moments to dust yourself off and go back at it the next day.
I 100% agree with you, Paul. Actually, I think you should have the thick skin of a rhino or something. It's really, really important. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. You're going to have setbacks every few days, every few months. Every day is a new day. Anything can happen in a startup. It's so volatile, in my opinion. And there's lots of highs and lows, at least in my experience. You have to have the thick skin in order to get over the lows, for sure.
Yeah, and you can never assume that you've made it, right? That we closed 2019, the most successful year we ever had as a business. We grew 70% last year. It was fantastic. And I run a business that works in healthcare. And not only do we work in healthcare, we work providing in-person services and medical practices, right? You can imagine what's going on with our business right now with COVID-19. We have to completely reinvent our service model in order to continue to produce revenue, right? That there's just when you think you have it right, something's going to happen that you can't control, and you're right back at fighting your way back to success.
All right, thank you so much, all of our panelists. That was some great conversation. A follow-up I have from the audience as well. Given the fact that we make all of you make all of these big decisions that impact, as you mentioned, several communities in the areas that you work in, what are the sort of challenges that you face when making these big decisions? And in particular, I'm curious about when you make these big decisions, you tend to do a lot of research, speak to a lot of people, I'm guessing, about making this decision. So how do you balance that with your own view and ensure that you're really making the best decision possible?
It's so easy, especially to be, oh, I've got the one idea, I've got the one passion, it's your baby, there's nothing wrong with it. So you're always thinking like, of course it's going to be successful. You know it best. If people don't get it, they just don't understand, right? And the problem with that, it's self-affirming and may put you down the road that you're missing blind spots. And really, it's important to get people that are not just there to like, oh yeah, go ahead, do everything and you'll do great. You need critical input to say, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Devil's advocate, what's the worst case? Really having that balanced opinion, having people from different, so we grew up in technology, right? And so we all think a certain way, right? bringing people from different types of roles and getting their inputs to look at the problem from different ways is so important, or else you'll be walking like a horse with blinders.
Got it. Thank you, Paul. Sam, did you want to take this question as well?
I again completely agree with Paul with respect to what he said. The only thing I would like to add is I always try to, we also in Maluuba used to have a number of advisors and board members who were much more experienced and provided guidance in different sectors and which they're specialized in. But I have one principle in mind which I always follow, and that results in me not being unsatisfied at the end of the day. It's in Hindi in India, there's a saying called "Suno sabki karo apni," which pretty much means listen to everyone, but do what your heart says. And that's what at the end, I try to do every time. I listen to everyone's advice, but at the end of the day, I have to make the decision by myself. So and that's when you will have a life of no regrets. You won't say, oh, I listened to X, Y, Z, and hence I'm molding my whole decision that way. Yeah, so that's what my principle is. Yes, I'll listen to everyone, and then based on all the information, I'll follow my heart. So basically, my suggestion is follow your heart at the end of the day.
Thanks so much, Sam. Something I want to ask in regarding to what Michelle was saying about sales and promotion, as well as Paul about reaching digital communities, is that nowadays, as someone with a technical background and without much experience in social media communication, etc., in selling your own company and your own brand, it seems that everything that you put online is more permanent. And I understand that with sales and promotion, it's about iterating quickly, but do you have any advice for how to approach developing your own sense of self and how to promote your own business and brand, given that as a math major? Paul, did you want to comment on this?
Sure. I think the first and foremost, understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And building out your position and getting yourself out there, you have to have it consistent. It's kind of the grit of the job. And if you're going to really want to be successful at something, you have to be prepared to balance that out. And so it's not like, hey, I want to be on social media, I'm going to go post 1,000 things all at once, right? No, that's not the way it's done. It's, you have to provide value and actually look for not reach out to people to like, hey, what can you do for me? It's, hey, I found this article and this might help your business. It's not going to help me at all, but you're building that awareness of what you can do and helping others, and magically that will come back. And so it takes way longer than people think, but it's so critical, to building your career.
Yeah, it's really when it comes to social media and putting yourself out there, it's really important to connect to your audience and also listen to what it is that they want, right? It's a two-way street. It's not about, I have a product, this is what you want. Because I think all of us can say, we can easily get it wrong. It's like we get it wrong when we build something and it's like, we think this is what you want. No, we have to listen. So it's communicating and connecting with your communities. It's a two-way street. We always have to listen to the consumer. That way we know exactly what kind of value to deliver to them. Given what's been happening lately, I see there's a lot of, emotional responses, a lot of messages being posted out there. And we've all seen, how detrimental it can be if you don't think before you post something. So one of my, biggest, huge, most important advice I would say for anyone in a position of influence and power, just choose your words wisely, because in this day and age, even if you post something and you remove it, all it takes is half a second, someone to screenshot it, and there goes your reputation. I've been seeing a lot of communities, just collapse overnight from, one tweet, 2 tweets. And it's really, and these are communities and businesses that have, taken years to build. And all it takes is one, misinformed, miscommunication, maybe even like an insensitive message for everything to just like unravel. Obviously there was a little bit more going on underneath, but you just have to really choose your words wisely because, things can be, the internet is permanent.
Right. Thanks so much, Michelle. Since we do have to wrap up by 11, I just had one closing question for all of you. So given that it is the end of our session and also as well as the end of the university careers for myself and a lot of, or the class of 2020, I was just wondering if you could go back in time and ask your, or tell your graduating undergrad self one thing, what would you tell them?
So I guess first I'd go back and say you need to try a lot harder in 2A because that was not a good term for me. That's my funny answer. But on a more serious note, I think I would tell myself to follow my passions more quickly, right? That once you're latched on to what you really want to do, then don't hesitate to go after it, because as the years pass, just life happens and obligations build, and all of those obligations are good, but you're at a point in your life when you're graduating, when you're at the lowest level of obligation you're ever going to have, right? And this is the time to be bold and take risks and think about where in the world might I want to work and what might I want to do, and go for it, right? Because 10 years, 20 years, for me, 25 years will pass very quickly, and you can't make those decisions that you could when you're young.
The one thing I wanted to add to to what just Paul said was, it resonates with me as well, because when I was starting out, I actually did a little bit of the opposite. I was too much in a rush to start a company. And I, as a result, I think we did end up selling for 150 million or whatever, but we did, if I took my time, let's say for a year or two, to do a lot of research, and because I just, right out of school, I wanted to start something. Instead of that, if I did a little bit of research and figure out the right product market fit and the right technology to solve a real problem, then I think, for example, Maluuba would have been much more successful. But I agree with Paul, cannot be 25 years or 10 years or something like that. But take your time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is. Don't rush into it, because once you're in, you're in. You have to then stick it out, and you won't probably like it if you rush into a decision.
Thanks so much, Sam. And thank you to all of our panelists. So this is all the time we have, I believe. Oh, actually, okay, never mind. This is all the time we have. Just had to check. But so once again, thank you to all of our amazing panelists, our virtual guests, and most importantly, to the members of the math class of 2020. I personally felt like I learned a lot today from all of our panelists. So thank you for, carrying the way forward for current Waterloo students. And just a reminder to the future Waterloo students that hopefully when we leave with our diploma in hand, whether it be virtual or not, I know it's a weird situation right now, that we also remember to give back to our communities. And in mind of that, so I'd just like to remind everybody that we have just launched the co-op challenge for the class of 2020, which aims to generate 2020 introductions to potential employers to help current students in need of a placement. So with your help, we know that we will not only meet this goal, but exceed it. So today, and we talked about a lot of career topics, and personally, the co-op system just made such a big difference for me as a class of 2020 grad, and we've heard about how it made such a big difference for all of our panelists. Paul Deforno mentioned it in particular, and as well as shaping their experiences and the ability to sort of approach the opportunities that they had. So co-op roles help students build skills and test career paths while contributing to the economy, which is also very important these days. So hopefully we can keep all that in mind. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and congratulations to the class of 2020.